things considered, I give it a B. Now this is a grinder that I really like because of its fine clicking system going down to around 8 microns per click. Now remember, this is 8 microns of burr movement and not 8 microns of burr gap. So if you think of the Comandante, that's 30 microns. Burr gap, burr movement is much more granular. It does a great job largely with kind of old school espresso, so you want kind of that traditional, thicker, syrupy style shots. It can do okay with modern coffees, especially if you're wanting that texture. It's not going to give you that clarity that some of these other grinders might give you, but it's built well, super easy to use, holds a good bit of coffee, grinds relatively quickly, and is going to last a long time. But I do recommend this often to people who want an espresso-only grinder because the price is pretty solid. It is able to get really granular with the dialing in, and it tastes really nice. So next up we have the K Ultra and the K Plus. I'm just going to kind of meld these together. I have reviewed them both, and the K Ultra has kind of replaced the K Plus, but regardless, we'll put them together. They both receive right at the same score because they're doing the same thing essentially. They both have great ergonomics with the click system on the outside. They both are more than granular enough to dial in your espresso. It's not as intense as the J-Max, but it's about 15 microns of burr movement per click, and you get good filter coffee with it as well. It doesn't excel at filter in the sense that it's not a filter grinder, but it does a great job. And for a lot of people, they prefer this for their light roast filters. It gives you a more blended taste of coffee. It's very similar to like the Comandante. It doesn't excel at traditional espresso, though it can do it pretty well. It doesn't excel at like modern espresso, though it does it quite well. And on top of that, it has that great build quality that is similar to that J-Max. So because of all this, I do give it an A because I think for the price point, for the build quality, for what all it can do, it is a phenomenal all-around multi-purpose grinder. Next, we have the Q2 heptagonal and the Q2 pentagonal from espresso. Now, this is their kind of budget line, and I believe they now have them come out called the Air. But anyway, these are phenomenal budget grinders, especially, and for me, the heptagonal. Now, that one is small. It can fit inside of an AeroPress. It's very lightweight, and it's still built quite well, especially for the price point of around $100, $120 US. So the heptagonal excels similarly as the Ks do with filter and with modern espresso and traditional espresso, kind of a jack of all trades type of grinder. It will do well with darker coffees, though it doesn't excel at it. That's where the pentagonal comes in. The pentagonal has bigger gaps around the burrs, which gives you a faster feed rate, a faster grind time, and will produce more fines for a more espresso-focused grinder or a more darkly roasted coffee grinder. But both of them kind of struggle in the dialing area with the internal click system. Though there are numbers on the bottom to help you dial, it's still a bit cumbersome and a bit annoying to have to deal with all those clickings. And also the build is not quite as good as their bigger brothers in the lineup. Overall, with the taste included, I give the Q2 heptagonal a C and the pentagonal a D. But that is without taking into account price. When you take into account price, they're probably sitting respectively at an A and a B, because for the price point, the fact that the heptagonal can pretty much match the flavor profile of the K series and the Comandante, that is something definitely to write home about. There's nothing really better at that price point for filter coffee. And it still does espresso well, though the time grinding will take a lot longer because of the smaller burrs. But to remind you, the burr size is the same as something like the Comandante. Next, we have the X Pro, which is kind of like the all-around grinder that espresso has put out. And I think they now have an X Ultra, but they're always putting stuff out. So the X series in general, I guess we can talk about. This one is a great all-around tool and is at a price point between that K series and between the Q2s. So it's kind of in between those with that burr size that's not as big as the K series, and it is one that I think a lot of people would really enjoy because it's got better ergonomics and a better feel and a better build quality than the Q2 without having to spend the extra money for something bigger like the K series. The X Pro gets a solid B from me, and when you take into account price, it might even raise up to an A. The espresso has absolutely done a great job of making all-around grinders that hit a pretty good price point for what you're getting. When it comes down to build quality, I'm taking into account kind of the inherent alignment, and a burr affixed to an axle is a huge thing for me. I've seen that this greatly affects the alignment and therefore the particle distribution and consistency of your grinder. And so having an affixed burr with the X Pro, that's a big thing. Next up, we have the ZP6. The ZP6 was something that a friend of mine in the Philippines named Mark sent to me saying, I think you'll love this with your predilections in filter coffee. At the time, the K Plus was my favorite hand grinder for clarity. I loved it over everything else, and he said this smashes it in clarity. The consumers didn't really like it. They said it made the coffee taste like water. It was too clear. But that for me was like, yeah, baby, hit me up. So took that ZP6, I ground with it, and it blew my mind. Made a video, and a few months later, they actually resurrected it. And I didn't even know they were doing it. Someone sent me an Instagram post that they were taking orders for it. So that was a pretty cool thing. And then over the years, it's become quite a staple for light roast filter enthusiasts. Now, this grinder, obviously, it doesn't really fit under the categories that I'm ranking right now because it doesn't do espresso. It's not multi-purpose. So I needed to rate this kind of separately, which took into account just the filter taste and just the grind ergonomics and all these different things. And so with that, I rated it on a separate scale and gave this an A. Now, I gave this an A because it does what it does incredibly well. It could have been an S but it's not very good at darker roasted coffees at all. It's pretty much medium to light roast coffees, and that's what you're going to get, and it only does filter. Next up, we have the grinder that I helped with, at least on one iteration of it, with the burr set, which is the Pietro. Now, the Pietro is something that I designed the burrs for their pro brewing model. It had nothing to do, well, I guess I had a little something to do with their multi-purpose burrs. They kind of changed how they create burrs based off of the kind of guidelines I gave them when we were creating the brew burrs. So there is some of my fingerprints, I guess, on that. But in any event, we're going to rank them as kind of two separate grinders because they have two very different outcomes. Even with the base, a lot of people still don't love it. That being said, my 3-year-old can grind with the base, so it's not that bad in my opinion, but it still is getting the lowest score possible for ergonomics because it is kind of a butt whenever you're wanting to grind coffee. But the quality of coffee it puts out is quite incredible, especially with the Pro Brew burrs. I made a video on it and explained my approach to making these burrs. I wanted it to be the most unimodal hand grinder, objectively, with the Master Sizer 3000 laser particle analyzer, and I wanted it to beat in double blind tasting with my tasting group Fellow Ode with SSP multi-purpose burrs, and I wanted it to beat the ZP6 consistently across everything I threw at it. I can't, in good faith, give it an A because the ergonomics are quite shoddy. Because the ergonomics are quite shoddy. But when we're looking at the multi-purpose burrs, they actually do a great job with espresso. They do a good job with modern espresso. They do a good job with filter coffee. And even though it doesn't top out any of the areas, I give it a B on the main scale, obviously not being an A due to the fact that the ergonomics are pretty trash. The price is steep. It's close to $500 for the hand grinder. So I think that's going to drop it yet another grade if we're taking into account price as an aspect. Next is the Orphan Espresso Apex. Now this I've not done an actual review on, but I have owned one now for about a year and have used it quite a bit. It's got big old ghost burrs inside of it, which is only for filter coffee. So again, we need to rank this only on the filter scale. Now the coffee that comes out of it is very polarizing. Ghost burrs are a polarizing style of brew. So there are lots of ways to get unimodality and kind of that super clear body. You can have really low fines and a wide peak, and that's going to give you some good clarity because you're not muddying it up with the fines. But you can also have a really narrow peak and a decent amount of fines, which is what these ghost burrs are going to give you. So you can get insanely high extractions with really high clarity, but there's kind of this bitterness about it that isn't the same bitterness as you would get from a grinder that's espresso focused. It's a different type of bitterness that's kind of difficult to explain, but there's some people that it doesn't bother and can be really great. So when we're looking at the filter rubric, I end up giving it a C because honestly, the pain of grinding with it is like 10 times worse even than the Pietro. It takes a lot longer than the Pietro, and it has one style of coffee it does, and you have to either like it or not. I think with the Pietro Pro Brews, like I think a lot of people blow it out of proportion with how clear it is. Yes, it's very clear, but it is something that you could do a darker roasted coffee on it, and it will taste good. It's not going to be water. It's not going to be this weird diluted mess. The Apex can be a bit more polarizing in its cut profile. So I give it a C with that, though it may bump up because the price is a lot cheaper than the Pietro. So it kind of depends. I wouldn't call it a bang for a buck because it's one style of filter for a pretty hefty price. So the build quality is incredible, and I love Dug & Barb at Orphan. They make some of the highest quality hand grinders on the market, which leads me to the next one, which is the Orphan Espresso Lido OG. Now, if there's one grinder I regret giving away or kind of putting up for competition to my Patreon, it is this, because it is a fantastic, fantastic hand grinder. It is what I would say the #1 multi-purpose grinder on the market, no questions asked. It does a really nice job with filter coffee. It does a really nice job with traditional espresso. It does a really nice job with modern espresso. Not the best, but great ergonomics. It is built incredibly well, and it has a massive catch cup if you want to grind a ton of coffee. It also has a phenomenal dialing system for extreme granularity. And for the dialing in, they actually use the vernier system, which gives you the most granularity possible. It is the only grinder that receives an S from me. If I could choose one grinder, is that what I would choose? No. This is hitting what most people are looking for in a hand grinder most consistently at the highest possible kind of consistency and output. Whereas I might choose something different, something like a Kinu with pour-over burrs, and I could switch those two out because I love the espresso on the normal, I love the filters on the pour-over burrs, or something like a Pietro, I can switch the burrs out. This is a phenomenal all-in-one. You don't have to faff around and have two hand grinders because it does everything quite well. They have the Etzinger burrs inside, which do a really good job. They're actually similar in geometry to like something along the lines of ZP6, though they don't hit the same clarity. They do a good job with modern and with traditional. It's a similar burr also to like the Brazza Sette. So doing low RPMs with it gives you really nice cups. And I think it's a slept-on hand grinder that people should really take a second look at, especially considering the build quality, the ease of dial-in, just everything about it. I really, really enjoy the Lido OG, and I do think it deserves an S, and it's the only S because it's the only one that I think hits all of the areas quite highly. It doesn't top anything out except for like build quality and dial-in, but it's higher across the board than any other grinder because other grinders excel in some areas and don't excel in others. So we understand it. That's why this gets the only S of the day. Next, we have the HG2 from Weber Workshops. Now, this is one I haven't made a video on, though I might at some point. It's a very expensive hand grinder, like $1,000 or more dollars. It's a countertop, big boy, an absolute pleasure to use. In fact, what sold me on buying one was I was at an expo and I spun the arm on it, and it just spins, and it just spins, and it just spins, and that was kind of fun. But also, I like using hand grinders, and it's the least painful one to use in that you spin it a few times and you have your dose because of the massive 83mm Mazzer burrs. Now, I notoriously am not a huge fan of Mazzer burrs, though they do a passable job on filter. It's better than the Q2 Pentagonal. It's better than like the Timor C2, but just barely. They do a pretty good job on traditional espresso, and they can do modern espresso. The thing is, some people might love them for modern espresso, and I've seen people who do, like with the Weber Key or with some of these others that house the 83mm. But it's a very specific profile because they produce massive boulders and really small fines.